Phoebe McPherson is an entrepreneur and a plant medicine advocate. She is the co-founder of Function and Fungi, and also she is the co-founder of the Microdosing Collective. More than all of that, she is somebody who I am blessed and very, very grateful to call a friend of mine. So Phoebe stopped by the podcast to talk about what she's been up to. For anybody that has been listening to the podcast and listened to the last episode, this episode was actually recorded before I went to Costa Rica. So if there seems to be some continuity errors, that is the reason that happened. But thanks again, Phoebe, for coming on, and thanks everybody for listening. Be sure that you are following the Trip Sitting podcast. My new handle is @_tripsitting_ on Instagram and TikTok. And if you feel called to, please give this podcast a rating and a review so we get in front of more viewers. That's it. Let's get into the podcast. Phoebe, welcome to the Trip Sitting podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm so great. So happy to be here. What a joy on a Friday morning. And it's super gorgeous out in LA. I woke up to like torrential downpour. And just as we started chatting, the sun started to peek out. So great day.
I love that. Here in Denver, it's going to be like 72 or like 74 degrees and like mostly sunny. Yesterday, it was like perfect. There's like some clouds now, but after some of the cold weather that we've had, I'll take this any day of the week.
Oh, for sure, right? More vitamin D.
Yeah, you've had a pretty busy week.
Yeah, I've had a kind of crazy end of March into April. So I left last month by sitting with grandmother medicine or ayahuasca. I drove out to a beautiful property and sat for 2 nights, which was wonderful. It'd been my first time sitting in years. And then from there, drove back to LA for like 12 hours and then flew up to Sacramento. I'm a member or founding member of the Microdosing Collective, a nonprofit working to change the laws around microdosing, providing legal and safe access. And so I was in the California State Senate speaking to assembly members about legalizing microdosing, legalizing low doses of psilocybin for at-home use. So that was wild. And then handing out samples of, legal microdosing with Kanna. So yeah, it's been a kind of crazy few days, and then came back, and here I am.
And for anybody that might be listening that doesn't know, you're also the founder or co-founder of Function and also Fungi, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then I'm an herbalist. I'm an educator. I do a lot of education around the plant Kanna and around microdosing, and then work with people one-on-one with like microdosing and herbs and all those lovely things.
When did you first like get curious about Kanna?
Oh, that's a great question. Excuse me. So I was in pretty heavily just in the plant medicine space. And that was kind of my introduction into this whole world of psychedelics and world of like alternative healing. And that space was using Kanna mixed with some other substances in higher doses to facilitate like really beautiful therapeutic healing in group settings. So that was kind of my first introduction to it, right? And kind of my first introduction to like therapeutic doses of MDMA. So that was really cool. And so it was like very much in my awareness. And then it was through my last relationship and my work with a previous company that I helped start called the Hearthstone Collective, where we started really looking at Kanna more intimately as more of like a legal therapeutic microdose. And that was happening when no one was talking about Kanna, right? So this was like 2021. And I had a really traumatic, really difficult first sit with ayahuasca, where I essentially, was really messed up afterwards. It was beautiful, but I wasn't able to get a grip on the emotions and what was coming up. And from that, I started working with low doses of of Kanna basically daily because I couldn't even touch psilocybin. It was like setting me off. And
Yeah.
that built this much, much deeper relationship with Kanna. And then we ended up launching like this whole line of Kanna microdoses. So that's kind of how it came into my ether. First, I was just like aware of it. And then there was like an actual need for it in my life when suddenly, my whole world was psychedelics and I couldn't even use psychedelics because I was like in such a bad place. And it was such a gift, and it brought me back to myself, and it brought me back from a really dark place. So that's kind of how I fell into it and found it. Or I like to say, mushrooms found me and Kanna absolutely found me.
Yeah. What exactly is Kanna? Like, where does it come from? What does it do? What is the
Yeah.
actual like chemical?
Yes. So Kanna is a plant. It's a
Okay.
succulent. For anyone listening that lives in Southern California, it's a cousin of ice grass, which is like this really cool grass that grows along the coast. It's totally invasive. But it's a succulent that grows in South Africa in a dry and arid region called the Karoo. It's kind of like this unmarked Joshua Tree type area. And it's been used by the indigenous there, the Kor and the San, for thousands of years, for as long as they've had a relationship with the earth. This plant is classified as an empathogen, and pathogens are classification of psychoactive substance that opens up your heart metaphorically. It increases feelings of love and joy, of empathy, of connection and trust, not just with yourself, but with others in the world around you.
I know
Some
like MDMA is considered to be like an
an
empathogen, and
empathogen.
also
Yeah.
like MDA, which
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever experienced MDA before. Have you?
Yes, I have. I've
Okay.
worked with MDA and MDMA. MDA has the street name of sassafras, not to be mixed with actual sassafras. It is different. MDA is basically like an extract of safflower oil, which can come from sassafras, but it's like very many degrees removed. But yeah,
Okay.
some people like sass more than MDMA. I've worked with both. I would prefer, I think, MDMA over SAS, but
Hmm.
yes, those are both empathogens, and then mescaline. Depending, it seems to be like an argument back and forth, but mescaline is technically an empathogen as well. And then, of course, we have Kanna. Um,
Okay.
and so outside of it just being like an empathogen, and some people call it like nature's MDMA, which is an okay term, but MDMA has amphetamines in it, right? It's synthesized, it's creating this like really speedy experience. Kanna does not have that pharmacologically. It is something that there's no amphetamines in
So you're
Kanna.
telling me you're not walking around just rolling tits 24/7?
No, but someone did comment on one of our posts about like, oh, okay, so you're just rolling 24/7. I was like, I don't know, do I look like I'm rolling 24/7? You tell me if I do. That's kind of a compliment, right? But anyways, I don't know. But yeah, so there's no amphetamine. So for anyone that has had experiences with MDMA and MDA, that really beautiful heart opening experience where you're like, wow, I love these people. Wow, I'm so much calmer. I'm so much happier. That's what Kanna is providing, but more on like a micro scale. I've heard
Okay.
people say like MDMA is to Kanna what like cocaine is to caffeine. So
Okay.
like, yeah.
Very, very different experiences.
Very, very different, but same classifications. And, I do understand that using the phrase nature's MDMA gives people something to like grab onto to like
Hmm.
understand. Like we've used it over at Fungi before, and like I get it. I don't love it, but I understand, and that is like the world of business. But outside of that, Kanna is functioning as an SSRI, so a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. This is what traditional pharmaceutical antidepressants and anxiolytics are based
Hmm.
off of, or how they're functioning. It's also a PDE4 inhibitor and a PDE5 inhibitor. PDE4 inhibition allows for feelings of euphoria. It's also binding to your opioid receptor sites in the same way that pharmaceutical opioids do without creating a habit, so it's non-addictive. So
Mm.
we're getting some like really cool things. So kratom, as you know, is also like a pain reliever, but it's very addicting. Kanna is not addicting whatsoever. There's no presented signs of withdrawal or habit. And then in addition to that, it's being studied for its PDE5 inhibition, which is being studied for like ED, which
Hmm.
is really cool. And then it's also increasing energy. So it can be really good as like a pre-workout, really good for connecting with people intimately. So great in the bedroom. Yeah.
Do you build up a tolerance? Like if you're taking Kanna every day at the same dose, like eventually will that same dose not really affect you as much?
Yes and no. There are people, so a lot of the research that's been done has been like in South Africa and then through like personal research, or sorry, self-reported studies.
Hmm.
People have been using Kanna for like 30, 40, 50 years, almost daily, not
Hmm.
having an issue. That being said, it is recommended, kind of like a true microdosing protocol, take a break every so
Yeah.
often. And one of the beautiful things about Kanna is that it's rewiring your amygdala, or like helping change your amygdala, which is the part of your brain responsible for your fight or flight center, your fight or flight reaction. So after a few months of working with Kanna intimately, especially on a therapeutic level, many people find that they don't actually need it because they
Hmm.
feel just as good. And like that's kind of the beautiful thing about it. If you're using it for more of like a recreational dose, you might build a little bit of a tolerance. But I think the bigger thing for people out there listening that are interested with trying Kanna is that some people find that they need to prime. So
Hmm.
priming with Kanna essentially means that you're upping the dose like every day or every few days until you have this quote unquote like breakthrough, and then you're able to taper back down to like a smaller dose. I've seen that with a lot of people, especially people that maybe have are a little bit more like dissociated, not as like in their body and their heart. So I offered that as well. And then the last thing that I'll say about Kanna is that it just makes you feel really happy and good, but it works like in a really subtle way. So at the end of the day, you're like, wow, I wasn't screaming at someone on the highway when they cut me off, or wow, I was able to have that really difficult conversation with my boss and not have a panic attack that overwhelmed me. And then it helps you sleep as well too. So it's a really incredible plan. I think it's as close as we can get to a magic pill. It's absolutely not a magic pill, but it's beautiful.
Yeah. That's not the last thing you're going to say about Kanna, by the way,
No,
because I
it's
still have
not.
more questions.
Yeah, please.
So just to be clear, we're not done. Back to the thing about it being an SSRI. So if somebody's on SSRIs, can they safely still take Kanna? Like, will it affect them?
So it's like you said, it's an SSRI. If you go on the internet and you talk to a Western doctor, they are going to say like it is not safe. The
Hmm.
risk here is a serotonergic reaction, which is when your brain floods with serotonin and you can
Hmm.
die, which is very, very serious. I have reports of people who have worked with small doses, so like 20, 30 milligrams of extracted Kanna, and they've worked with that alongside their SSRIs or to help them taper off of their SSRI.
Hmm.
I cannot legally recommend that. I'm
Yeah.
also not a doctor, but I can give, I can provide, some color around people that have done that successfully and found it to be really amazing. At the end of the day, I would say if you are on an SSRI, talk to your doctor. But that's what I can offer. If you do decide to try it, you know, you can reach out to me or like work with a really, really low dose. Like 20 to 50 milligrams of Kanna, especially like an extracted Kanna, that's going to be a safe dose for you. I wouldn't go higher than that.
Hmm. What
Yeah.
is a recreational dose of Kanna? Like, where does that start?
Yeah. So
And what's that like?
it's fun. Yeah, it's super fun. It's an alternative to other substances, or it can be like a primer or like an addition to substances or alcohol or something like that. So the reason I like paused when you said what is a recreational dose is because the Kanna space is so new and is growing
Hmm.
so quickly. There's actually not a standardized way to talk about dosing. So if you go on the internet and you look at Kanna, you could find 100 milligrams of Kanna and it'll be three different prices because one person is talking about raw Kanna, where it's just been like ground up. One person is talking about like 100 to 1 extract, and someone else is talking about a standardized extract.
Mm.
I'm going to recommend that if you are using it like in a product or recreationally, either go with just the straight cut up Kanna and like put it in a joint, or I drink it as a tea, or get the standardized extract and
I
make
can
sure
smoke
you're.
it. Hold up.
Yeah, so you can smoke Kanna. It's amazing. So it works synergistically with cannabis. People love mixing cannabis and Kanna. And in fact, the Dutch explorers who landed in South Africa in the 1700s saw the indigenous smoking Kanna and cannabis together. And because of that, these experiences, they thought that Kanna was hallucinogenic and psychedelic.
Mm,
Isn't that fascinating?
that's dope. I love that.
Super cool. So super old combination, like as old as time is Kanna and cannabis together. Highly recommend it. I know my co-founder loves smoking spliffs with Kanna in it.
Hmm.
I personally am not a big cannabis person, but I love smoking Kanna with Damiana or just Kanna on its own. So find cut up Kanna on the internet, like Kanna tea. Scalitium source is a really great source, and I'm sure we can put that in the show notes. But back to like dose for recreational, if you're looking at a standardized extract, 100 milligrams, 50 to 100 milligrams is where you're going to start. I
Mhm,
would say as you go up higher, the biggest thing with Kanna is it kind of needs a catalyst so that you don't feel sick. So higher
mhm,
doses of Kanna can bring on like nausea, and vomiting, headaches. But when you have a catalyst, it can actually, taper those effects and kind of break through to the next level. So when you're pairing it with like a gentle stimulant or mushrooms, you can really get to that rolling feeling, I think at least.
mhm,
So 50 100 milligrams, I would pair it with like a microdose of mushrooms. I would pair it with like espresso or guarana. I think it's really amazing there. Some people pair it with LSD. I love it with cacao for super gentle stimulation. And again, you feel really happy, you feel really good. I have so many reports of people that go out like partying, go out to festivals. They don't want to take MDMA because that come down is so hard. And I'll give them Kanna gummies or Kanna products, and that's all they take the entire night. They don't take anything else. And
mm.
that is the future of like safe partying, giving people options where they feel just as good and don't feel the need to destroy their bodies.
Yeah. And then also don't feel like shit the next day.
Yeah, I mean, Connor has no come down. Like, how can you get better than that? And we've all been there. I mean, I'm sure in the Trip Sitting blog, we've all been there. Anyone listening, where that come down is rough. Like, I've had a come down where it was like 3 days of like depression. I was like really, really sad. It was really intense. And, I'm someone that doesn't participate in recreational experiences a lot. And so
Mhm,
for me to even experience that, I was like, I can't imagine what it's like for someone that's using it more regularly, and there has to be another option, because at the end of the day, like, why do we take drugs, right? Why do we do recreational things? Because we want a moment of escape. We want to be able to connect with people. We want to be able to be in this kind of new world just for a little bit to feel better. And so
mhm.
how beautiful is it for us to be able to have experiences with something that gets us to that same place with, without the come down?
Yeah, humans have been using altered states of consciousness since our existence.
Totally.
Since the not just humans, by the way, other animals too are very very well documented in
Yeah,
using different plants in order to achieve altered states of consciousness.
totally.
Essentially, getting high. Like
I
getting
know.
high is a very normal part of being human, and so
To be
it's so
human is to
interesting
want
that
to get
like yeah, exactly, and like it's weird that there's still like this stigma around it, and why again like there's not obviously the same stigma around drinking alcohol. Like that's an incredibly normal thing, and like all you're doing is just achieving an altered state of consciousness in a different way. That's all these
exactly.
other substances do, is just giving us a different way to achieve a different type of altered states of consciousness. There's no this one's better than that one. It's just what do you want? Do you know what you're actually doing? Like, do it with a little bit of intention, and then it's fine.
Well, exactly. I mean, you said it so well. Like, we humans have been achieving altered states of consciousness for as long as human beings have been around. For as long as I think organisms of any kind have been around, there's been altered states of consciousness. And I think it's so important and core to like the progression of humanity and consciousness, if we want to get like super political there. And yeah, like Khan is just an ally. Like I think so often in these conversations around psychedelics, and sometimes even with Kanna, and like functional mushrooms, people vilify something else, right? They're like, okay, well,
Mm-hmm.
it's this because this other thing sucks. And none of it, I think, is bad. I think it can all be so beautiful. And again, it's like the poison is in the dose.
Mm-hmm.
So is there intention? Is there understanding? And just knowing that you have options for whichever path that you want to take that night. Like, it's all beautiful, right? Just be safe. Don't hurt other people, integrate and drink water. I don't know.
Drink water.
Drink
That's
water.
always yeah, that's always the biggest one.
Right? I know.
So I wanna go back to your sit with grandmother over this past weekend.
Yeah.
How was when was the last time that you had experienced ayahuasca?
2021, so 3 years.
Okay, gotcha. And so
Uh,
what like were you just feeling the calling again? Like had you been thinking about it for a while that you wanted to go back to her, or did things just really align with you? Like what brought you to this new one?
yeah, so I sat for the first time was 3 years ago, and it was a 3 night sit, and that one ripped me apart, right? Like, I had
3 nights in
really
a row?
3 nights in a row. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I would never sit just one night. I think multiple nights helps you like go deeper. And
I
essentially, what
agree.
happened, yeah, the first time that I sat was I was like halfway through the birth canal, so like I couldn't fully surrender, and I was struggling so much,
Hmm.
and it was just a dark night of the soul for 3 nights.
Yeah.
And like after that, I was a wreck. I was having like these dissociative episodes. I was really struggling. The medicine was still so present that my partner at the time, he was taking melatonin at night, and his taking melatonin was activating my ayahuasca experience.
Hmm.
And so it was putting me back into this dark place. It was just really difficult. And then I've always thought like I'm never gonna. I'll go there again, but like in years. And then our assistant is very involved in that space, and she always talks about it. And my co-founder had never sat with ayahuasca, and he's always wanted to sit with it and wanted a really intimate setting. And obviously, like we work in the psychedelic space, so we have like a lot of those access to a lot of those experiences. And one of our good friends mentioned that on her property, she has like thousands and thousands of acres, right? Like beautiful, and that she wanted to bring the tribe to her home and have a really intimate setting. And I was like, wow, this sounds really perfect for what my co-founder is looking for. And I brought it to his attention, and he was really excited and asked if I would come sit with him. And it felt right. And I was like, okay, I think this is my time to go back in. I'd been pulling the ayahuasca card a lot, and so it felt right. And I was really nervous going back in, but it was beautiful. The first night was again another dark night of the soul. Um, it was awful. It's just like sheer terror for me, like absolute sheer terror, like shaking back and forth, convulsing, and like begging the medicine to stop. Like,
Yeah.
please don't put me through this again. Terrible. And then for some reason, the second night, I don't know what exactly shifted, but it went from having this experience with grandmother where she was controlling everything to I fully surrendered in a way that I hadn't in the past. And suddenly we had a harmonious relationship. And that's
Mm.
typically my relationship with all other psychedelics. Where, like we're talking to each other, we're like very in sync. And I finally got to that place with ayahuasca, and it was still a challenging night, but it just so much more beautiful, so much more gentle. I had the most transcendental experiences I had. I'm gonna sound crazy to everyone talking, but if you've sat with ayahuasca, you'll get it.
I've said some crazy shit on here. Don't worry about it.
So we were at this point in the night, and it was crazy because I found out that two of the other girls were going through the exact same thing as me at the same time, where I was on my hands and knees, and suddenly like timelines were collapsing, where I was experiencing like multiple timelines all at the same time, and like I was giving birth. And I've never given birth, but suddenly I realized I'd given birth before, and I was like, oh my God, I've been here before. And I was having this experience of giving birth in a hospital room, in the jungle, at home, in like this pool with a partner, by myself, and it was all happening all at once. And it was the most insane experience. And when people talk about like past lives and future lives, I like understand the concept, but I've never had that experience. And I was like, oh my God, I get it. Like, we know nothing about the universe. I was like, he is so much smarter than us humans. Like, this is wild. And I was like, I need to go talk to my past lives. It was insane. And then we found out the next morning that two of the other girls were having the exact same experience as me at the exact same time. And like people talk about, oh, it's just like just DMT, but there's such a deep intelligence in ayahuasca, and I don't think you can explain it any other way. Then like people, okay, there's no other way to explain it until you've experienced it, and then you see like, no, it is an actual like intelligence that you're working with, and yeah.
Yeah, it's very hard to explain to people who have never experienced ayahuasca, like just like the sheer power that that spirit has. Like even people, like I know people that have worked very very deeply with mushrooms and psilocybin, and like mushrooms are very very beautiful, but it's a different energy. It's a very
Completely.
very different energy, and it's you know, again, like even to people who have experienced mushrooms, I'm like, yeah, like you have experience with psychedelics, but don't don't take any of the lessons of the experience that you have from mushrooms and think that that's going to truly transfer into the ayahuasca experience, because it won't.
Well, totally. And we were having this conversation over the weekend where we were talking about people like microdosing different things, like microdosing San Pedro and now microdosing ayahuasca and mushrooms. And, I think the energy and the experience of mushrooms is something that is very good for microdosing. It's primed for almost everyone can have an experience with mushrooms. And yet with ayahuasca, I think it's this intelligence and experience where like you need to prep, you need to go, have that experience, and then leave. It's not really something where you want that energy to be with you at all time. Whereas
I've
mushrooms,
heard
like,
of people that do microdose ayahuasca, by the way.
no,
Do you
I
know people who do that?
oh totally, totally. So what the
That's
microdosing is
insane.
not totally, and this is why the conversation came up because I personally don't think that ayahuasca is an energy that we should be microdosing, but for some people, yes. What they're microdosing is not actually ayahuasca as we know it. They're just microdosing the vine.
The Banoisteris capi vine.
Happy.
I did not
So,
I
no, it's
did
okay.
not
So they're
say
just
that right.
microdosing copy, which is just the vine, and that's legal. What's
Yeah.
illegal is shakruna, which is
Yeah.
the other piece, and basically like layered and cook it down. Anyways, so that's what they're
Ayahuasca
microdosing.
can also be made with mimosa hostilis, which is what people usually do to do just like a pure DMT extraction. But I've heard of people also using that actually in ayahuasca as well. Basically,
I
just
know,
any DMT containing plant with an MAOI, which is usually the copy vine.
totally. It's going to be so interesting to see what happens with the psychedelic space, and then we have like stuff like pharmawaska, right, which is like completely synthetic ayahuasca. And I have very good friends that are very much of like, I don't like the gatekeeping of ayahuasca. I want everything to just be like, just give me the substances, give me the alkaloids. And I definitely am one of the like, let's keep it natural, like, like there's a
Yeah.
way to do it. And both sides are going to exist, and I think we are lucky that we live in a world where people can choose. But for me, it's definitely a little sad sometimes to see, the bastardization of such beautiful medicine.
I think it's good to have options. I do fully agree with that, but there needs to be proper truthful education around the options. And I think that's where just like our society, the way that it currently exists, does not do very correctly is that like everybody has an agenda. And so when you don't understand that, obviously like the pharmaceutical companies that are creating these things, that are creating the pills, and probably will eventually be creating microdose psilocybin pills for you to take rather than just taking ground up microdose mushrooms. Their agenda is to make money. Like in our society, in capitalism, that's what the agenda is. And so understanding that versus you know using it in more of an indigenous way, and like everybody's got to eat. I've got nothing against capitalism. Like we all need to. That's the way society is, and like we need to be able to make money. But just understanding, like, okay, is there the genuine like spirits and like the genuine energy behind some of the substances, the way that they're made, and like understanding what's actually going into that process.
Yeah, exactly. I think what you said is so important and so beautiful. Like we live in a westernized, late capitalistic world, and we have to honor that. We have to understand that, and we have to allow that to play out. And at the same time, like there's such beauty and understanding and wisdom that comes from the indigenous and the Eastern world, and we have to honor that and understand that. And how will the two come together? I don't know, but I think allowing them to come together and play together is going to be really, really important in these next few years, like absolutely essentially important. And I just want to go back to that point you made about, you have to educate people and tell people what they're actually putting in their body. An amazing magazine and online media company for psychedelics called Double Blind just did a report. I'm sure you've seen this, where they
Mm-hmm.
bought like 50 different mushroom chocolate bars and tested all of them. And a lot of them had no mushrooms in them whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
They had 4-ACO,
Mm-hmm.
and really, really high level. For anyone who doesn't know, 4-ACO, like super, super high level, is essentially synthetic psilocybin. What's
Mm-hmm.
happening is that when you eat it, it's breaking down into psilocybin in your body and then breaking down into psilocin.
Psilocin. Yeah.
Yeah, psilocin. So it's kind of like non-detect, it's a lot cheaper because it's basically like one step before. I'm oversimplifying it, but just so people understand, we can call it like synthetic psilocybin or like a
Mm-hmm.
premium opposite of psilocybin. And the reason people are doing this is because it's so much cheaper. And like, I get that, but I think there's something really awful that's going on around this where you need to be honest about what you're putting in your products, right?
Yeah,
And
that's
then
it.
like they had tests where it was like this one bar, I'm not going to name names because I don't want anyone coming at me, where they said it was psilocybin and cordyceps, or like ground up psilocybin
Hmm.
containing mushrooms and cordyceps. And there was zero of either of those. And there wasn't
Yeah,
even cordyceps. It was just 100% for
yeah.
ACO.
Like
And
a
like
lot of
that,
them will put on the chocolate bar. It'll say like, proprietary ground magic mushroom blend, and like,
yeah,
no,
it's fucked.
it's
It's
not. When I
really,
was at Wonderland in Miami, there's people handing out their products and things that they make, and this person handed me like this little tablet and said like, oh, this is a pure like psilocybin tablet. I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like, how did you do the extract? Like, how do you get
yeah,
just pure psilocybin in it? And then he's like, oh, it's actually for ACO, but don't tell anyone. And like, I'm like, dude, don't fucking tell me it's psilocybin then. Like, tell me it's a 4-8. Like, there's nothing inherently wrong with 4-ACO, like nothing at all. But if it's like, be honest about what it actually is. Like, that's what pisses me off, is like, just be honest about what it is. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but don't tell me it's something and then have it be something else.
exactly. Exactly. And it's like, that's what we need. We need some more transparency and honesty. And like, if we get a little bit political and talk about legalization, I have some like thoughts around legalization and creating some parameters around what people are putting in their products, and some regulation is actually going to help a lot of people, like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people, because there is so much money involved in psychedelics, because people want to make so much money and are okay with lying to consumers, right?
Yeah.
It's really not okay. So I'm excited to see what happens. I'm really happy that they did that report. And then also the last thing I'll mention on that is there's a lot of Amanita brands. Like you can go and buy Amanita legally, and it's not Amanita, it's for ACO. And that is really,
That's
really
fucked.
dangerous. Because imagine taking, so for people that don't know, like a microdose gummies of Amanita, you're not supposed to get high. You're supposed to feel a little something, like social dose, but not get high. If you have 4-ACO in there, you will blast off. And so if
Mm-hmm.
someone's taking that and driving, that is what's going to give psychedelics a really bad name and a really bad rap, because they can't even test that it was 4-ACO. It's going to show up in blood work or whatever, a test, that it's psilocybin. And
Mm-hmm.
like that is extremely, extremely dangerous for the space. And like when I think about the work that I'm doing, advocating to change the laws, like there's nothing that I can do around that. Like that is a serious concern. And I can understand why like lawmakers wouldn't want to allow for legalized microdosing
Yeah.
when that kind of stuff is coming up.
Well, see what, like, if you look at the cannabis industry, obviously, like
Yeah.
there are going to be parallels between the cannabis industry and the way that psychedelics are playing out. I think that there are definitely a lot of differences that maybe people that are outside of the space don't quite understand. But
Yeah.
as far as some of the similarities go, like what I do like about the cannabis industry is that before any product ever gets to a dispensary, it
Mm-hmm.
has to be third party tested for every alkaloid, for everything that is possibly in there. So the consumer genuinely knows what it is they're putting into their body. And I think
Exactly.
that that is a very, very positive thing that can happen in the psychedelics industry. But given the fact that the way it seems it's being legalized, it seems like it's not ever really being legalized in a way, at least right now. And I live in Colorado, and I know in Oregon it's legalized in a very specific way, but like it's not in a way where a consumer can just go to a dispensary, a shop, purchase a magic mushroom product and then leave with that. It
Mm-hmm.
has to all be done under supervision with somebody. And so if it continues to just get rolled out in that way, this whole black market area where all of the products and most of the consumers are actually going to be interacting with these substances, it's still just going to be the Wild West and people can do whatever the fuck they want.
I couldn't agree more. And since you brought up Oregon and Colorado, like what's happening there is really difficult to see, because what they're what they are creating is a an atmosphere that tells citizens, constituents, that if you want to have an experience with magic mushrooms or a therapeutic experience with psilocybin, the only way that you can do it is by paying us $3, $5, $10,000, and you go into a sterile room or a room that's tried to make like cutesy, and you are having a supervised experience with someone that you don't know, and then you leave. And that's not always great. My friend Allie, who is one of the co-founders of the Microdosing Collective, she says it perfectly. She says, we are legalizing the wine bottle before we're legalizing a sip. And how much beauty could come from people actually having these experiences on a microdose level and feeling safe around it. And then people say, well, they could just stockpile all of like their microdosing capsules. And I come from the microdosing space. There are very easy ways to ensure that people do not take more than a few capsules, because you can add in herbs and other substances that will make people like itchy or hot or something like that deters them from ever doing that again, and it doesn't hurt them. But it's like, little kids when they have this stuff painted on their nails so they don't suck their thumb anymore. Same thing,
Where I will give some props to Colorado, and I do live here, so I do have to do that, is they did take some of that into account in the way that they went about their decriminalization efforts.
Okay.
Because the way that they went about decriminalization is they basically made it so it is like you cannot get penalized for using, growing, or sharing any magic mushrooms. The only thing you could get penalized for is physically buying and selling. But other than that, I can completely legally walk into the middle of a park and completely open and give you an entire ounce of bag of magic mushrooms that I wanted, and that is protected under Colorado state law.
That's really cool. I actually
Oregon did not do that.
Oregon's figuring its stuff out. Look, at the end of the day, like, as much as I'm trying to like knock or saying like I don't like the way that stuff's being done, like, it's difficult. It's difficult to be a revolutionary. It's difficult to be the first. Like, and I give props to Colorado and Oregon. I give props to Australia that legalized MDMA therapy. Like, it's so amazing, and it just gives such credence and reverence to this beautiful world that we're in, that we're open to this.
Yeah. How did the meeting in Sacramento go with Mike? Like, how did that go? How do you think that it was actually like perceived?
Really great. Really great. The thing is, like, I'm not going to speak to any of the assembly members or people individually, but I can speak from my own experiences, and I can speak, from Washington, D.C., and I still have a lot of connections back there. Everyone is microdosing.
Yeah.
Everyone is microdosing. They're either microdosing mushrooms or LSD. They know the effects, and if they're not, they're probably taking Adderall. So everyone is using substances of some kind, and people know that it's the reality, and they know that it's the future, and they are responsible for thousands and thousands, if not millions of people. And so imagine being responsible for that many people. Imagine having lobbyists and policymakers that are coming at you being like, I need to be able to make money off of this, and I support you because I'm able to make so much money. And then other people coming in saying like, if you don't help me on this, like, I'm threatening A, B, and C. And it's not an easy job. I do not envy them whatsoever. It's really difficult, but everyone is super receptive. And I think, as millennials and now Gen Z, I'm cusp, so I don't know where you fall, but
I'm cusp.
Okay, cool. We expect things right now. We expect things really quickly. And if we look at the plight of, I like to say veganism, if you look at the plight of LGBTQ and gay marriage, you look at the plight of anyone who's fought for like equality and access in the country, even women, people of color, it did not happen overnight. And this space has just started really like gaining energy. And so I think being patient and knowing that by the end of the decade, some major change will be here, which isn't something that like I would love to say. I want to say, yeah, next year it's going to be legal. But I think going slow is the way that we make sure that it's something that sticks around and doesn't freak people out and becomes fully scheduled again.
Yeah. Just to that point of going slow, like, we live in such a fast-paced environment, and I never realized how fast-paced this environment was until I started taking psychedelics, and that actually forced me to like be present for 6 to 12 hours at a time and actually understand like, oh fuck, like, this is what it means to actually be here and be present and not be trying to do a million different things at once. Like it's hard in the society that we've built for people to realize how genuinely unnatural it is the way that we live our lives, and how yes, it's great to be connected, and I've said this before, like I've met some amazing people on social media, and like I again, this is how we've connected, and like a lot of the people on my podcast guests that I've had, like it's all because of that. But like it's not normal to have access to 100 million people at one time just at the tip of my fingertips. And so like using these devices and like understanding where we actually are and being able to consciously slow down, I think will serve us a lot better in the long run, and understand that it's actually better if we take, like, I think everything should just slow the fuck down. Like it's hard to see that realistically happening, but that's my genuine thing. Like, I would like the human race to be around for a very long time. I'm not really going to care once I die, but ideally I don't want to see the end of the human race anywhere near my lifetime. And so in order for that to happen, we need to slow the fuck down and actually figure out, like, how do we genuinely ensure the longevity of us?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think you're so right. Like if psychedelics can teach us anything, it's to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
And I work in the psychedelic adjacent space. I work with functional mushrooms. I work with people one-on-one. I work with microdosing, and it's the number one thing I see day after day after day is like, you got to slow down, because you're not even slowing down enough to listen to your body and find out what's actually going on. Something I always talk about is this problem we have with data, and letting data be how we listen to our body rather than actually listening to our body. And when you use that as the tool and as a crutch rather than as an ally to help you be sensitized, what happens is you become even less sensitized to your body.
Do you have
And
an
you
Apple
become,
Watch?
no, I got rid of all tech like that.
I
I
did.
like
I did. I did too. I used to wear my watch too, and I realized it was like, one. I got into just this fucking habit of checking it every 5 minutes to see if I had notifications. One, and then two, I was looking at like the data of my heart rate and like every time I'd work out and things like that, and like realizing that I wasn't actually listening to my body like in the slightest bit, and so I needed to just get rid of it.
100%. And like, look, data can be amazing. It can really help us understand, and it can be an absolute ally. Like people with like an aura ring and like a whoop, if you're an athlete, like, yeah, understand what's going on. Get your blood work done. Like, understand it. But you have to have, there has to be a happy medium between listening to your body and seeing data, and
Mm-hmm.
like letting both live harmoniously. And I think this is something that we're coming back to again and again in so many different facets as humanity. Like, how do we pull together like one and two things? How do we pull together like the masculine and the feminine? How do we marry polarity? And like that is reflected across every part of life that we're struggling with. Like the data is the masculine, like listen to your body is like the feminine, right? Like the indigenous and the Eastern way is the feminine, and like the Western way is like late capitalism, and like
Mm-hmm.
pharmawaska. And so like, how do we start to pull these together and honor them and allow them to both exist without vilifying one or another, and also helping people understand like there's a better way. And when you understand that there's a better way, you actually want to start to slow down because you're listening to your body and you're allowing the data to show you, oh, I need to slow down, right? And I think it's really difficult for people. I think it's difficult for people to put on the brakes without like completely shutting down. But I don't know. There's hope, right?
I think there's hope, but yeah, I think just like in general, like our central nervous systems are just kind of fucked from the get go.
No, dopamine. Like we get those
Yeah.
dopamine hits from every notification, every time we see we did a good workout, every time someone likes our post. Like we are addicted. We have such a consumption and addiction problem in this country, around the world, maybe. And there's so many ways that we can combat it and honor it and release some of that negative energy, but it takes work and it takes psychedelics. It takes Kanna and mushrooms.
Yeah, it definitely does. I'm gonna put a little pause on this conversation
Yeah.
and take a step back. What do you do for fun, Phoebe? Like when you're not, talking about psychedelics and trying to educate the world and do
Yeah.
everything.
Well, this is like fun for me. Like I
Hmm.
love what I do so much. Like
What do you do
I
when you need a break from this? Because I love this too, but sometimes I'm like, I need to get the fuck away.
Oh, well, I love nature. Like nature
Yeah.
is my fun. Like I love going for like really long hikes. I love the redwoods, like taking like a few days to go up there and just be with Pachamama, be with nature. Getting away from the noise, booking an Airbnb in like Costa Rica or Mexico or Europe that's far away from humanity, where I can
Hmm.
just really tap back into my own body and listen. It's definitely like one of my favorite things in the world to do. Um, love,
Costa
you know,
Rica, Mexico, and Europe are not that far away from humanity.
well, no, but there's places in each of them
Yeah.
that are very far away from humanity. Let me focus back down on that. Like there's one Airbnb that I actually think I'm gonna book for my birthday, and you see the bird's eye view, and it's literally just this like super cool concrete house and the ocean, and then nothing around it, and it's like you're 5 miles from anyone.
Hell yeah.
And I'm like, yes, that's what I want. And not that I don't love humanity. Like, I love my friends. Like, I have a moon circle that I go to every full and new moon. Like, I love my community. Like, I live in Venice. And at the same time, like, just getting away from it all is such a gift and one of my favorite things in the world to do. I'm also like a wellness girly. So I love Pilates and yoga. I love going
Hmm.
for runs. But really, just like being in nature is like the best thing in the world, right?
Yeah. Do you go
Um,
camping?
Oh, absolutely. I love car camping. My friend has like a pop-up tent on top of their
Oh,
car.
that's
Like
sick. I want one
that's
of those so bad.
they're so cool. Highly recommend. Love road trips. And then I think the other amazing way that I like to let loose, I guess, and get away is like transformational festivals or bread and butter, right?
Hmm.
Like Envision is absolute heaven. Like I love anything like that that's marrying like education and understanding and like our connection between nature and humanity, and then also like amazing music and just like dancing until you can't feel your feet anymore.
Have you been to Burning Man?
I'm going this year for the
Yeah,
first
this
time.
year.
I'm so
Wow.
excited. Yeah. What about you? Have you been?
No, I haven't been. I haven't been to nearly as many festivals as I would like. Next year, I think I really want to try to go to Lightning in a Bottle. If you're
We're
familiar
going
with
this
that
year.
one. Oh, you are.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
I've heard that that's kind of like mini Burning Man. From some people that I know that go to both. Envision is obviously a dream, and Burning Man 2 is obviously a dream too. Um,
Well, anyone going to Lightning in a Bottle, look out for Function and Fungi. We'll be handing out tons of samples. It'll be really fun.
nice.
And then right before Lightning in a Bottle, a lot of my friends in Venice put on like mini Burning Mans.
Hmm.
So I'm going to this one called Nowhere Festival. It's really cool. It's like 4 days in the desert. It's basically a mini Burning Man. I love stuff like that. And it's like 150 people, and that'll be really amazing. I'm teaching a workshop. My other favorite thing to do is like teaching workshops.
Hmm.
I love it so much. I'm doing a charity workshop tomorrow, teaching people how to make their own mushroom tinctures, and then I'm doing
Nice.
one in a month, teaching people how to make their own microdosed mocktails, either for the morning or for the afternoon. Um, I love stuff like that. Is really how I have fun. And then being alone in my kitchen with my herbs, I have this giant wall of herbs. I'll send you a photo. You can link it in the show notes. But it's literally like people talk about like all my money goes to travel, all my money goes to like furniture and design, all of my money goes to mushrooms and herbs, like all, and I love playing. Like I do a lot of consulting for formulation, so I do custom formulation for people. I do custom microdosing formulation, and being able to just be with like the plants and the mushrooms and like listen to them and like create new formulas, favorite thing in the world. Like I love making like fun little drinks when my friends come over. Like I'll tap into their energy, I'll ask them where they need support, and I'll make them something right then and there. And like that is like my favorite thing. It's yeah, I don't need more fun than that.
I love
I
that.
mean,
No,
being
being
super boring in that sense, but yeah, those are my hobbies: plants and mushrooms, psychedelics, and going to festivals and being in nature.
that sounds like a pretty good fucking hobby to me.
I mean, I think it's pretty great.
Well, Phoebe, is there anything else that you would like to say before we go, and then also where can people find you
um,
and the things that you work on,
oh,
all
thanks.
12 of them?
Well, Cam, I just want to say that this podcast is so beautiful and it's important. And please keep doing it, because it's giving a lot of people access to understanding, mushrooms and psychedelics and the space in a way that I don't think any other podcast is doing it. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So again, my name is Phoebe McPherson. I work on Function, which is a functional wellness company. We make sublingual tinctures for daily well-being. I also work on fungi. We create chocolate and gummy delights for recreational use, activated with Kanna, giving people access to safe psychedelic alternatives ahead of legalization. And then I'm also a founding member of the Microdosing Collective, and we're working to legalize microdosing in the state of California and then nationwide. So all of those 3 places are great if you want to get involved in psychedelics or want to support in any sort of way or try out my products. You can also find me on Instagram at _Phoebe_McPherson. And from there, you can find the 2 other brands. And then if you ever need support with microdosing, macrodosing, mushrooms, plants, I have a text-only number, and I help people that way. And I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's all the places that I do stuff. But just a big shout out to everyone in the psychedelic space, and everyone listening. Just know that, if you want to be involved, you can be involved. One of the best ways to help the space is to destigmatize psychedelics, destigmatize microdosing.
Talk about it.
Talk about it as much as you can. Post about it. Share with your family. Share with your friends. And don't be militant about it. Be understanding and soft and say, yeah, I microdose. And don't force someone to do it. Just put that out there and let it sit, because I can tell you, no matter what, whether they respond positively or negatively, they've planted a seed. And planting a seed is how we move the space forward. So,
or a spore, as some might say.
Oh, yes. There you go. The mycelial network will start connecting.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Phoebe. This has been truly a fucking blast and a pleasure. You are genuinely an amazing person. Your energy is so pure and authentic, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
So much love to you.
So much love to you and to everyone out there in the ethers.
Thank you to Phoebe, and thank you to everybody for listening to this podcast. I appreciate all of you. I am blessed to be able to do this. And if you have any ideas for guests, or if you ever want to get in contact with me and potentially sponsor the episode, or just collab for any reason, send me an email, which is tripsittingblog@gmail.com. In fact, I actually had a listener get in contact with me this past week, and it truly, truly warmed my heart so much. You know who you are. Thank you for listening. And I hope everybody has a blessed day. Much love.